She had served God perfectly for 12 years. Perfect attendance, perfect volunteer record, perfect theology, and she had never felt more empty in her entire life. Sarah Martinez was about to discover that the very thing keeping her from God was working for God. This is the story of how she quit everything and found everything. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what happened to Sarah might be the answer to the emptiness you've been feeling too. Let's begin. The question that shattered everything. The Christian bookstore smelled like vanilla candles and new paperbacks. Sarah stood in the devotional section, her basket already heavy with resources for the 6 Bible studies she led each month. 6. Most people would call that excessive. Sarah called it faithful. She reached for another commentary when a voice behind her said, "That's a lot of books." Sarah turned. An elderly woman stood there, silver hair pulled back, eyes impossibly kind. She wore a simple dress and carried nothing but a worn Bible. "Oh, I teach several groups," Sarah explained, slightly defensive. "I need to stay prepared." The woman nodded slowly. "How long have you been walking with Jesus?" 12 years, Sarah said it with pride. 12 years of consistent, dedicated service. Beautiful. The woman smiled. And in those 12 years, how many hours would you say you've spent just being with him? No teaching to prepare. No service to plan, just being? Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The answer was there, sharp and horrifying. Almost none. Sarah's voice cracked. "I serve him every day. I read my Bible. I pray. You work for him?" the woman said gently. "But do you know him?" "Not know about him. Know him. Like you'd know a friend you spend hours with, doing nothing, saying nothing, just present." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. 12 years. 12 years of Bible studies, worship teams, mission trips, prayer meetings. When had she last sat with Jesus without an agenda? "What's your name, sweetheart?" the woman asked. "Sarah. Sarah, can I tell you what God told me 40 years ago when I was drowning in ministry just like you?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak. The woman leaned in, and her next 4 words detonated Sarah's entire theology. Just be with me. Not just do for me. Not just work harder. Not just serve better. He whispered to my exhausted soul, "Just be with me. That's all I've ever wanted." The woman patted Sarah's arm and walked away, leaving her standing there with her basket of books, her packed calendar, and a question that would unravel everything. Sarah. Had she spent 12 years serving a God she didn't actually know? The unraveling. Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot for 40 minutes. The woman's question looped in her mind like a song she couldn't shake. How many hours have you spent just being with him? She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her calendar. Monday, lead worship team practice. Tuesday, teach women's Bible study. Wednesday, youth group planning. Thursday, prayer meeting coordination. Friday, outreach committee. Saturday, hospital visitations. Sunday, teach Sunday school, lead worship, attend 2 services. Every single day, something for God. But when had she last been with God? Her abuela's name lit up the screen. Sarah answered, grateful for the distraction. "Mia, I need to tell you something." Her grandmother's voice wavered. "I went to the doctor today. They're saying it's Alzheimer's, honey. Early stages, but..." Sarah heard the rest through a fog. Appointments, medications, memory care facilities. Her abuela, the woman who taught her to pray, who raised her after her parents died, who showed her what faith looked like, was disappearing. "I'll be right there, abuela." As she drove, Sarah's mind raced. She'd need to organize a prayer chain, research care options, coordinate family meetings, add more tasks to her calendar. Then, cutting through the noise, that woman's voice, "Just be with me." What if her abuela didn't need Sarah's organization? What if she just needed Sarah's presence? What if God felt the same way? That night, Sarah did something radical. She canceled every commitment for the week. Every single one. The texts came immediately. "Who will lead Bible study? We need you for worship. Are you okay? This isn't like you." She stared at her phone and typed the same response to everyone. "I'm learning the difference between serving God and knowing God. I need time to figure out which one I've been doing." Then she turned her phone off and sat in silence. Just her and God. And for the first time in 12 years, she had no idea what to do. The art of presence. Sarah's abuela sat by the window, staring at the garden below. She didn't turn when Sarah entered. "Abuela, it's me, Sarah." Slowly, her grandmother's face brightened with recognition. "Mia, you came." "Of course I came." Sarah sat beside her, fighting tears. They sat in silence. Sarah's mind churned with things she should say, prayers she should pray, scriptures she should quote. But something stopped her. Just be with me. So she just sat, held her abuela's hand, watched the garden together. After 30 minutes of silence, her grandmother squeezed her hand. This is nice, abuela whispered. You're usually so busy telling me things. Today you're just here. Sarah's throat tightened. Have I always been too busy? Oh, Mia. Her grandmother turned to face her. You're the busiest Christian I know. Always doing. Just like Martha. Martha loved Jesus, Sarah defended. She did, but Mary chose better. Abuela's eyes grew distant. Your abuelo, before he died, he told me something. He said, I'd trade 1,000 fancy dates for one afternoon where we just sit together. That's when I realized presence is the greatest present. She tapped Sarah's chest. God doesn't need your productivity, Mia. The universe doesn't run on your to-do list. He just wants you. Not your service. You. Sarah spent the next 3 hours there. No agenda. No structure. Sometimes talking. Sometimes silent. And she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. That night, Sarah sat in her empty apartment with her Bible closed on her lap. She didn't open it to study. Didn't highlight or take notes. She just held it and prayed the most honest prayer of her life. God, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to just be. I built my entire identity on serving you, on being useful, on having the right answers. But if you took away every ministry, every task, every accomplishment, would I even know how to be with you? The answer came not as words, but as a sensation, like a father's arms wrapping around an exhausted child. Finally, you're finally here. Not performing, not presenting. Just here. This is what I've been waiting for. Sarah wept. 12 years of striving. 12 years of earning. 12 years of trying to be worthy. And he just wanted her company. The collapse of the performance empire. Sunday morning arrived, and Sarah stood in the empty church building 2 hours before service. She'd been asked to lead worship, one of her 6 regular roles. Her guitar sat in its case, unopened. She couldn't do it. Couldn't stand on that platform and sing about intimacy with God when she was just discovering she'd never had it. Pastor Williams walked in, coffee in hand. Sarah, ready for? He stopped. What's wrong? I need to step down. From worship leading, from everything. Sarah's voice steadied. All of it. Every ministry, every committee, every role. Pastor Williams set down his coffee slowly. Sarah, you're one of our most valuable. That's the problem. Sarah's voice cracked. I'm valuable. I'm useful. But am I actually walking with Jesus? Or am I just building a spiritual resume? I've served here for 12 years, Pastor. And last week, a stranger asked me how much time I spend just being with God, and I realized the answer is almost none. I work for him, I perform for him, but I don't know him. Pastor Williams sat heavily in a nearby chair. How long have you felt this way? I didn't even know I felt this way until someone asked the right question. Sarah sat across from him. When's the last time you sat with God with no sermon to prep, no counseling to plan? Just sat? The pastor's face went pale. I don't. We've built an empire of Christian activity, Sarah said softly, and I think we've lost Jesus in the process. At least I have. They sat in silence until Pastor Williams finally spoke. What if you're right? What if this whole church is Martha running around serving, and we've forgotten how to be Mary? Then maybe it's time we learn. Sarah stood. I need to step away. Not forever. But until I know the difference between serving God and knowing God, until I can tell you, honestly, that my relationship with Jesus is more than a job description. She left her guitar there, left her ministry badge, left 12 years of identity on that office desk, and walked out into the morning sun feeling terrified and free at the same time. The wilderness of unproductivity. The first week without ministry felt like withdrawal. Sarah would wake up, reach for her phone to check ministry schedules, and remember nothing. No one needed her. No one was depending on her. The silence was deafening. She started taking long walks in the park, Bible in hand but often unopened. Just walking, thinking, praying unstructured prayers that sounded more like conversations than presentations. One afternoon, she sat on a bench and watched a father and daughter at the playground. The little girl wasn't doing anything impressive, just playing. And her father watched with absolute delight, not because of what she did, but because of who she was. That's how I see you, Sarah felt in her spirit. Not for your performance, for your presence. Tears slipped down her cheeks. A text from a former Bible study member. Sarah, we miss you, but something beautiful is happening. Without you leading, 3 women have stepped up to facilitate. They were too intimidated before. Your absence created space for them. Maybe this was God's plan? Sarah stared at the message. Her absence was bearing fruit? How paradoxical. How biblical. She thought of John 12, verse 24. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. What if her stepping down wasn't failure? What if it was multiplication? What if God had never needed her competence? What if he'd been waiting for her surrender? She visited Abuela every day that week, not with a ministry agenda, but with simple presence. They watched birds, looked at old photos. Sometimes Abuela remembered her. Sometimes she didn't. On Thursday, Abuela had a moment of perfect clarity. Mia, you're different. Softer. What happened? Sarah smiled. I stopped working for God. I started being with him. Huh? Abuela nodded knowingly. You learned the secret. What secret? That intimacy is the point. Not activity. Intimacy. She squeezed Sarah's hand. God is not impressed by what we do for him. He's moved by what we do with him. Everything else flows from that. Abuela, even if you forget my name tomorrow, will you still love me? Of course, Mia. You're my granddaughter. That's how God loves us, Sarah whispered. Not for what we remember about him or what we do for him. Just because we're his, the unexpected mentor. 3 weeks into her sabbatical, Sarah sat in a coffee shop with no Bible study to prep, no meeting to lead. Just a journal and a cup of tea. Is this seat taken? Sarah looked up. The woman from the bookstore stood there, same kind eyes, same gentle smile. Sarah gestured to the empty chair. I've been looking for you. I never got your name. Grace. The woman sat down. Though isn't it funny that you found me when you stopped looking so hard? Sarah laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. Everything's been paradoxical since you asked me that question. The best truths usually are. Grace sipped her coffee. So, how's the journey? Sarah poured out the past 3 weeks, the stepping down, the silence, the fear, the freedom, the strange fruit of her absence. Grace listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her presence completely unhurried. You know what you're learning? Grace finally said. You're learning what Brother Lawrence called practicing the presence of God. Not performing for an audience, but simply being aware that God is with you, in the mundane, the glorious, the sorrowful, all of it. But what about service? Sarah asked. Doesn't God call us to serve? Absolutely. But here's the thing. Grace leaned forward. Service that flows from intimacy is life-giving. Service that substitutes for intimacy is soul-crushing. You were doing the second one. Think about it this way. A branch doesn't strive to produce fruit. It abides in the vine, and fruit happens naturally. You were trying to produce fruit through sheer effort, disconnected from the vine. Exhausting, right? Unbearably. Jesus said it plainly in John 15, Abide in me, and I in you. Apart from me you can do nothing. Not work harder for me. Abide, stay connected. Remain in relationship. Everything else flows from that. You. I feel like I wasted 12 years. Oh, sweetheart, no. Grace's eyes filled with compassion. God wastes nothing. Those 12 years taught you what doesn't work. That's not wasted. That's essential. Now you get to discover what does work. And you'll serve again, but from a completely different place. From overflow instead of emptiness. From love instead of obligation. How do I know when I'm ready? Grace smiled. When serving feels like a natural extension of being with him, instead of a substitute for being with him. When you can stop serving without losing your identity. When you delight in him more than the ministry itself. Before she left, Grace wrote something in Sarah's journal. The true way of service is companionship with God. Walking with him, not just working for him. Everything else is religious performance dressed in spiritual language. The return. 5 months later, Sarah sat in the congregation, not on the platform. She'd been attending as a regular member. No titles, no roles. Learning to worship without performing. Learning to receive without giving. It felt strange, vulnerable, beautiful. Pastor Williams stepped to the microphone. Before we close today, I want to share something. 5 months ago, one of our most faithful servants stepped down from every ministry role. Not because of sin or scandal, but because she realized she'd been so busy serving God that she'd forgotten to know God. Sarah's eyes widened. Her honest confession wrecked me, because I realized I was the same way. So I took my own sabbatical from some responsibilities. And you know what I discovered? God's been waiting for me. Not for my sermons. Not for my leadership. For me. So today I'm proposing something radical. We're canceling half our midweek activities for the next 3 months. Instead, we're encouraging everyone to learn what Sarah learned, how to simply be with God, to walk with Him instead of just working for Him. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Some of you will panic, but what about ministry? Here's the truth. Ministry flows from intimacy. If we're not intimate with Jesus, we're just religious activists. So let's learn to be with Him. Then let's see what He does through people who actually know Him. After the service, people swarmed Sarah. Some hugged her with tears. Some thanked her for starting something. Some admitted they were drowning too. Pastor Williams pulled her aside. Would you consider coming back, not to your old roles, but to help others learn what you've learned? To mentor people in the art of presence? Sarah smiled. Only if I can do it while still guarding my time with Him. The moment ministry becomes more important than intimacy, I'm out again. Deal. You know what's wild? Sarah said. I thought stepping down would diminish my impact. Instead, it multiplied it. Because now, I'm not teaching people how to serve God. I'm showing them how to know Him. And that's changed everything. Full circle. 1 year after that first encounter, Sarah stood in the same Christian bookstore, but her basket was empty. She carried only her worn Bible and a single journal. Back again? Sarah spun around. Grace stood there, eyes twinkling. Grace, I've been praying I'd see you, and here I am. How's the journey? Sarah laughed. Completely different. I'm serving again, but it's lighter, joyful. I lead 1 Bible study now instead of 6. I mentor 3 women in practicing God's presence. And I spend every morning just sitting with Him. No agenda, just being. And I've never felt more alive, more connected, more genuinely useful. Not because I'm doing more, but because what I do flows from relationship instead of obligation. And? Grace nodded, unsurprised. You've learned the secret that most Christians never discover. God doesn't want employees. He wants companions. Everything else is just religion. Can I tell you something? Sarah's voice softened. My abuela is in late-stage Alzheimer's now. She doesn't remember my name most days. But I sit with her for hours, and she knows I love her. And I finally understand what God was teaching me through her. What's that? That presence is the greatest present. That love isn't measured by productivity. That sometimes the most spiritual thing we can do is simply show up and be with someone. No fixing, no teaching, just presence. Grace squeezed her hand. You know what I think? I think you're finally walking with God instead of just working for Him. How does it feel? Sarah thought about her mornings spent in unhurried prayer, her worship that came from overflow instead of obligation, her service that felt like natural expression of love instead of grinding duty. It feels like I've finally come home. Grace smiled. Good, because that's exactly where you've always belonged, in companionship with the God who made you. Everything else flows from there. As Grace walked away, as mysteriously as she'd appeared, Sarah whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not a polished prayer, not a performing prayer, just 4 words that had come her anthem. Just be with me. Maybe you're like Sarah was, busy for God but not with God, serving Him but not knowing Him, drowning in ministry while thirsting for intimacy. Here's what I want you to hear. God is not impressed by your resume. He's drawn to your presence. If you've found yourself questioning your own walk with God, if you're exhausted from trying to earn what's already been freely given, if you're tired of performance and hungry for presence, take a moment right now to reflect. Are you trying to impress God with your actions, or are you seeking to simply walk with Him, day by day, step by step? You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be honest. God isn't looking for employees. He's looking for companions. If this story touched your heart today, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your biggest takeaway. Tell us what walking with God means to you. Let's encourage each other on this journey. Drop companion in the comments if you're choosing presence over performance starting today. And don't forget to like this video. Subscribe for more stories that challenge religious performance and deepen authentic faith. And share this with someone who's drowning in spiritual exhaustion. Remember, you're not God's employee. You're God's beloved companion. The most spiritual thing you might do today isn't adding one more task to your list. It might simply be sitting in His presence and letting Him love you. Walk with Him, not just for Him. God bless you.